Good evening. You probably won't believe this, but every story you'll hear tonight came from somewhere real. These are the 10 most disturbing true Alaskan missing tourists. Horror stories told to me by people who vanished soon after, or whispered from towns that no longer appear on any map. I've been traveling across Alaska, collecting these accounts from where the cold never sleeps. Some say the things I recorded still move beneath the ice, still follow the ones who listen too long. Watch carefully. Something might be watching from where these stories were found. If you want me to keep digging into the dark, like, subscribe, and stay until the last transmission ends. You probably won't believe this, but the road I took that night wasn't supposed to be there. I've driven through Alaska's interior for 20 years, long hauls between Fairbanks, Anchorage, and the oil fields. I know the routes, the logging spurs, the maintenance loops. There's nothing new up here. But that night, my GPS swore there was a shortcut through Denali State Park that would save me 50 minutes. The road looked paved on the screen. I remember thinking, finally, some government efficiency. The turnoff was subtle, 2 faded reflectors, and a gravel arc curling into black spruce. The sign just said, Mile 118, Maintenance Access. My dispatcher had no record of it, but I'd been delayed by a blizzard earlier and didn't want to miss my drop-off window. I figured it was an old service route reopened after roadwork. The first few miles were fine, snow-packed but firm. My headlights cut clean lines through the mist. The forest pressed tight, on both sides dense, old, the kind that swallows radio static. My rig's CB went dead about 15 minutes in. No stations, just a hiss, low and steady, like someone whispering under the static. I rolled down my window once, just to check the sound wasn't mechanical. Cold air hit me like knives. The noise wasn't from the truck. It was the woods. Then I saw the first sign, slow curves ahead. The letters weren't reflective anymore, almost eaten away by rust, but the post was new, unnaturally new, not a scratch on the metal. The road ahead curved sharply left, so I slowed to 20. That's when I caught the shape in my rearview mirror. Something moved between the trees, tall maybe 7 feet but narrow. Its outline flickered like heat distortion. I braked hard. The trailer groaned. I stared into the mirror, holding my breath. Nothing, just the mist curling back into place. I told myself it was a moose. They wander near the road all the time, but the next sign shattered that excuse. Welcome to mile 118, home. I remember my chest tightening. The metal was pristine again, like new signage, but the lettering was hand-painted. Black, dripping strokes, uneven and childlike. The road narrowed after that. Trees leaned over, their branches clawing at my trailer's roof. When I tried to reverse, the tires spun uselessly. Gravel screeched, but I didn't move an inch, like the truck had sunk into something soft. I checked the gauges, everything normal. But outside, the forest had gone dead silent. No wind, no engine hum. Just that whispering hiss again, only closer. I stepped out with my flashlight. My boots sank half an inch into the frozen gravel. It shouldn't have been that soft. Then I saw the prints. Dozens of them. Bare feet. Human-sized but elongated, like someone had walked while sinking deep into mud. They circled the cab, all facing inward. I jumped back inside, locked the door, and tried to radio again. Nothing. The GPS blinked once, then displayed coordinates that didn't make sense, latitudes beyond Alaska's range. Then it said, route completed. The road ahead glowed faintly, like it was reflecting moonlight, but the sky was completely overcast. I couldn't tell where it led anymore, so I did the only thing that made sense. I drove forward. The gravel crunched beneath me, slow and uneven, and the deeper I went, the more wrong the air felt. It smelled electric, like ozone mixed with something sweet, rotten. My headlights dimmed slightly, as though the dark itself was absorbing them. And then, maybe 5 miles in, I saw movement again, this time directly in front of me. A man stood in the middle of the road, facing away, wearing a bright orange dot vest, reflective and new. I honked. No reaction. I rolled to a stop, maybe 10 yards away, engine idling. The man didn't move. When I finally stepped out and called to him, he turned slowly. His face wasn't there, just raw, pale skin where features should have been. His mouth was stitched shut, but I swear I heard him whisper my name. When I tried to turn back toward the highway, the GPS said something new, recalculating. Next destination, ... home. I don't remember deciding to drive forward after that. I just did. The man's faceless head followed my lights as I passed him, even though his body didn't move. I pushed the rig to 40, tires grinding on that wet gravel. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I told myself I was dreaming, maybe hypothermic, maybe dozing at the wheel. But the heater was blasting, and my coffee was still hot. The road started twisting. It didn't feel like a real route anymore. No markers, no guardrails, no snowbanks pushed aside by plows. Just this narrow black corridor through endless spruce. Every few hundred feet, I'd see another orange vest standing off the shoulder. Different heights, different builds, all facing the truck, never moving. About 20 minutes later, I spotted headlights ahead. Thank God, another driver. I flashed my brights and slowed down, relief flooding me. But as the truck drew closer, my stomach flipped. It was my truck, the same make, same model, same dent on the right fender. I slammed the brakes, tires skidding sideways. The other rig mirrored me perfectly, every motion synced. Even my brake lights flickered at the same rhythm. Then, as I stared through the windshield, my own reflection in the opposite cab lifted its hand and waved. I backed up, nearly jackknifing the trailer, and the other truck rolled backward too, perfectly synchronized. Then both engines stalled at the exact same second. That's when I lost it. I jumped down, wrench in hand, and stormed toward the mirror truck. Each crunch of gravel echoed like glass breaking. The cab door was open, swaying gently. No driver inside. Only a parka draped across the seat. My parka even had the burn mark on the sleeve from where I dropped a cigarette last winter. The radio inside hissed alive. My dispatcher's voice crackled through, but it wasn't right. It had this doubled, underwater tone to it. "We've been trying to reach you, 817. You never left the yard." I dropped the wrench. "I'm out here. I'm in Denali. I took the maintenance access." "You're not supposed to be there," it said, slower now. "Nobody comes back from mile 118. The cab light flickered, and the door slammed itself shut. When I turned around, the road behind me was gone. Just forest. My own tire tracks ended in dirt, not gravel. The panic set in deep. I climbed back in my truck, floored the ignition. The GPS blinked again, different route now. It said, "Proceed 6 miles to exit." I followed it, because there wasn't anything else to do. The farther I went, the more the trees changed. Their bark started peeling upward, like skin lifting from heat blisters. Snow vanished completely. The air turned damp, heavy, smelled like swamp rot instead of pine. Then, through the windshield, I saw shapes hanging from the branches. Dozens of them. People, or what used to be, all wearing the same reflective vests, each one swaying in slow, opposite rhythm to the wind. When I passed under them, the radio came alive again. Not voices this time, breathing. My breathing, perfectly synced, lagging by a second, like it was repeating what I was doing, only slower. I screamed into it, begged anyone to answer. Static drowned everything. The GPS dinged again, arrived at destination, but there was nothing ahead. The road dead-ended into a clearing with a single trailer. Looked exactly like mine, door half open, engine running. I should have left it. Should have turned around and driven into the woods if I had to, but I didn't. I walked straight up to that idling truck because I needed to know what was inside. When I opened the cab door, I saw myself sitting in the driver's seat, eyes wide, frozen, mouth moving without sound. The body twitched once, like something underneath was trying to escape the skin. The version of me in that seat turned its head toward me and smiled with the wrong face. I ran back to my truck, but the highway wasn't behind me anymore, just that same endless sign ahead, gleaming in my headlights. Welcome to mile 118, home. I don't remember the exact moment I stopped running. I just remember the quiet afterwards, so thick it pressed against my ears. My boots crunched over gravel that felt softer than snow. Every breath came out as fog, even though the air wasn't cold anymore. I didn't dare look back at the other truck, at the thing sitting inside it, wearing my face. I climbed into my cab, slammed the lock, and tried the ignition again. The engine sputtered but refused to start. The GPS screen was still glowing faint blue. It didn't show a map anymore, just a single word pulsing in the center. Stay. I pounded the dash. The lights flickered, and for a split second, I saw a face in the reflection of the windshield, not mine. Too long, too narrow, with eyes where none should fit. I blinked and it was gone, but the windshield was fogging from the outside, like something breathing on the glass. That's when I heard it again, the whispering, only now it was layered, hundreds of voices speaking in unison, repeating one phrase over and over. I couldn't make out the words until I rolled the window down a few inches. They were saying mile numbers, counting up, 1, 2, 3, and then they stopped at 1-18. The air outside smelled like metal and wet bark. My headlights dimmed, then flared back to life. The forest in front of me had changed again. The trees were no longer trees, they were lines. Perfectly vertical black streaks against a gray sky, like a child's crayon drawing come to life. In between them, something was moving. Dozens of things, crawling on all fours, pale and boneless, dragging themselves toward the road. I shifted the truck into neutral and rolled backward, praying I'd find the turnoff. The mirror showed nothing but more road. The landscape didn't recede it, just repeated, like I was driving through the same stretch over and over. Every 50 feet, the same broken sign appeared. Welcome to mile 118, home. On the fourth pass, there was someone standing beneath it. Not one of the faceless workers. It was me again, only this time, his face was clear, but calm, smiling faintly. He lifted his hand, palm open, and mouthed something. I couldn't hear it. So I leaned closer to the window, still rolling backward, until I could read his lips. He said, "You made it back." My foot hit the brake instinctively. The truck jolted to a stop. The engine roared to life on its own. The CB crackled again, faint but distinct, my dispatcher's voice. But it was warped like a tape played backward. "Turn off the lights." I didn't want to, but my hand moved on its own. When the headlights cut out, the darkness swallowed everything. For 3 seconds, there was nothing. No road, no trees, no horizon, just black. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw faces pressed against the back window of the cab, dozens of them, all whispering my name. I hit the gas and drove blind, tearing through whatever that place was. Branches scraped the sides, sparks flying off the mirrors. The GPS went haywire, flashing random numbers. I screamed, begged, prayed, anything to make it end. Then the light returned. Snow, real snow. The radio switched to static, and the smell of diesel filled the cab again. When I finally stopped, I was back on the main highway. My clock said only 15 minutes had passed, but my odometer had gained 347 miles. I called dispatch immediately. They said nobody had heard from me in 3 days. The delivery yard cameras showed my truck leaving on the night of the storm and never returning. When I looked in the side mirror, I noticed something carved into the doorframe near the handle. Deep grooves, like fingernail marks, forming letters. Mile 118 welcomes you home. I tried to sand them off the next morning, but every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear the whispering. It comes through the radio sometimes when I'm parked for the night. Always the same words, soft and patient, recalculating, next destination, ... home. They never found any record of that road in Denali, but when I pass mile 118 now, my GPS always reroutes no matter where I'm headed. You probably won't believe this, but the first thing we noticed was how quiet the campground was. Lake Iliamna usually hums with wind and insects, the kind of constant white noise that follows you everywhere in Alaska. That day, though, the lake looked like glass, no ripples, no birds, no breeze. Just a sky so still, it felt like it was holding its breath. My boyfriend, Ryan, and I had been driving the long way back from Homer, taking back roads for the scenery. We weren't even planning to stop for the night until we saw the small wooden sign, Silver Pines Campground to 3 miles. It wasn't on any of the maps we'd checked, but it was getting dark, and the idea of sleeping beside the biggest lake in Alaska sounded perfect. The gravel trail leading in was narrow and lined with birch trees, so white they almost glowed. About halfway down, we started finding signs of life: an old ranger booth, an empty canoe rack, then a row of campsites along the water's edge. The first one had a rusted trailer with moss growing up the tires. The second had 2 tents already set up. Ryan honked once, just to see if anyone was around. No movement. The tents were modern, bright, yellow nylon, rain flies, still taut. One even had a folding chair outside, and a little pile of firewood stacked neatly beside the pit. It looked like someone had just stepped away for a hike. We parked beside them, calling out. Nothing. Ryan walked to the tents while I stayed by the car. He crouched, tugged one of the zippers. "They're closed from the inside," he said. That didn't make sense. I laughed nervously and told him maybe they were just sleeping, but even as I said it, the hairs on my arms lifted. It was almost evening, but the light didn't seem to fade. The lake's surface reflected everything perfectly: our car, the trees, even the tents, but not us. I told Ryan to leave them alone. He shrugged and unpacked the cooler while I went to use the outhouse further down the path. The trail wound through the trees, only a minute walk, but I swear the shadows moved wrong. They bent toward the lake instead of stretching east. The outhouse was old, wood splintering from damp. When I pushed the door open, the smell hit first wet rot, and something faintly metallic. Inside, someone had carved dozens of names into the walls, each scratched out after being ridden, and below all of them, freshly gouged. "Don't open the tents." I froze, flashlight trembling. The letters were sharp and raw, like whoever wrote them did it fast. Desperate. When I stepped out again, the air had changed. It was colder, and the lake's mirror surface had gone dark as if something massive had passed beneath it. Ryan was by the fire pit, still setting up, grinning like nothing was wrong. "Nobody's coming back for these spots," he said. "Might as well use it." I told him about the writing. He shrugged it off, said it was just a prank. Then he pulled open one of the tents. It wasn't zipped anymore. The inside was spotless: no sleeping bags, no backpacks, nothing. Just a small depression in the soil, as if someone had been lying there long enough to press into the earth. He checked the other tent. Same thing. No sign of life. No footprints around either. When we built our fire that night, it wouldn't catch properly. The flames hissed even with dry wood. I swear the smoke drifted into the lake and just stayed there, hovering above the surface like it was trapped. Around midnight, I woke up to splashing. Slow, rhythmic, heavy. I thought maybe a moose had come down to drink. But when I peeked outside, the water was still flattened. There were wet footprints leading from the shoreline, straight to our tent. Ryan said we should follow the tracks back to the lake in the morning, but when dawn came, there were no tracks at all. Only 3 tents now, perfectly zipped from the inside. When I woke up that morning, Everything was wrong. The air inside our tent was freezing, my breath hanging in the dim light. Ryan was already outside, crouched by the fire pit, staring at something. His voice was low when he called out, like he was afraid to speak too loud. "There's another one," he said. At first I thought he meant another camper, but when I stepped out, I saw it a third tent. Bright blue, identical to the others, pitched about 10 feet away from ours. I swear, it hadn't been there last night. The firewood pile was gone too. Ryan tried to laugh it off, said maybe he'd missed it in the dark, but I remembered exactly how the campsite looked before we went to sleep. 2 tents, both yellow, hours between them. This one hadn't existed. We checked our phones for service. Nothing. The time had frozen at 2:47 a.m., no matter how many times I restarted mine. Even my watch was dead. The silence felt thicker now, like the world was holding its breath again. Ryan unzipped the new tent before I could stop him. Inside was a sleeping bag, zipped tight, with something inside it. He touched it, and the bag moved. He jumped back, yanking the zipper open. There was nothing inside, just a hollow shape pressed into the nylon, still warm. We packed the car immediately. He tried the ignition, no response. The dashboard lights flickered weakly, then died. Even the key got stuck for a second before releasing. We were trapped. The lake had changed color. It wasn't blue anymore, it was gray, the same tone as the sky. No horizon line, no depth, just an endless reflection of itself. I told Ryan we should walk back up the gravel trail, find the main road, but when we started, the path curved the wrong way. It led us back, toward the tents. We tried 3 times, each attempt taking longer. The forest pressed closer each loop, the birch trunks crowding the path until we had to turn sideways to get through, and the smell wet moss mixed with something coppery, like rust or blood. By afternoon, the sun hadn't moved. The shadows were still fixed in the same place. We gave up and sat by the car, trying to keep calm. That's when Ryan noticed the footprints again, wet, leading from the lake, stopping right at our fire pit. Only this time, there were 2 sets, one large, one small, bare feet. He followed them to the shoreline, calling out. His voice didn't echo. The sound just stopped, like it hit something invisible. I stayed behind, staring at the tents. There were 4 now. A breeze finally moved through the trees, the first in hours, carrying this faint, whispering sound. I couldn't tell if it was wind or voices, but they were all saying the same word, low and rhythmic. Stay. Ryan didn't come back for a long time. When I finally worked up the nerve to go after him, I found his backpack near the water's edge, open and half submerged. His boots were still standing upright beside it, laces neatly tied. I screamed for him until my throat hurt. The lake didn't move. Not a ripple dot. As I stumbled back toward the site, I saw his flashlight beam flicker near the trees. I ran toward it, but when I got there, the light was inside the blue tent. The zipper was closed. I could see shadows moving inside, slow and deliberate. I shouted his name, pulled the zipper halfway, and saw something pale shift away from the opening. A hand, or what looked like one, reached out and grabbed the flap from the inside. Pulling it shut again, I backed away, tripping over my bag. The other tents began to sway gently, even though there was no wind. That was the first time I heard Ryan's voice, but it wasn't coming from inside the tent. It came from the lake. "We found another spot for you," it said by nightfall. The blue tent was gone and in its place stood a 5th one, bright red, with my name stitched into the fabric. That night, the sky never got dark. It just turned gray and endless, dim light that made everything look washed out, like the color had been drained from the world. I sat in the car the whole time, clutching Ryan's jacket, staring at that red tent with my name stitched across the flap. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every few minutes, I'd hear a zipper slide open somewhere behind me, followed by a faint rustling sound, then silence again. The air outside was too still for anything to move like that. At some point, I realized I was humming. I don't even remember starting. Just this low, tuneless hum that came out of me like my body was doing it on its own. And when I stopped, the sound continued from the trees. Dozens of low human hums echoing mine. Around dawn, if you could even call it that, the hum stopped. The red tent was gone. In its place, water pooled where the soil had been, perfectly clear, perfectly still. I saw my reflection in it, but not like normal. It was smiling. That broke something in me. I ran for the gravel path, not caring where it led. The forest felt wrong, stretched and warped, trees leaning toward me like ribs closing over a lung. Every time I looked back, the tents were farther apart, spaced wider, the colors all wrong: blue, yellow, red, white, then black. The last one was huge, taller than the car, its fabric fluttering though there was no wind. The sound of splashing followed me, slow and steady, matching my steps. When I stopped, it stopped. Then, faintly, I saw Ryan, standing near the tree line, soaked head to toe, skin pale gray like driftwood. His clothes hung heavy, dripping lake water. He smiled, but it wasn't right. His lips moved too slowly for the words. "You should come back. It's better here." I told him to stay away, that we'd find help, but he just shook his head. "No one ever leaves. You don't leave Lake Elie. You just ... change." I turned and ran again. My legs burned, lungs on fire, but the road never appeared. Only the lake ahead, closer than it should have been, like it had followed me inland. Its surface rippled in a perfect circle. The tents lined the shore now, hundreds of them, stretching down both sides of the water. Some old and faded, others brand new. Some half collapsed, sinking into the mud. I could hear faint whispering coming from inside each one, voices repeating over each other, like overlapping recordings. When I looked down, the water touched my boots. I hadn't even realized I'd walked into it. The ground sloped away too fast, cold, seizing my ankles before I could move. I fell forward, catching myself on my hands, and when I lifted them, they were covered in silt that clung like wet ash. Something brushed past. My leg under the surface, smooth, human-sized, then another, wrapping around my calf. I screamed and yanked away, stumbling toward the trees, but the mud held me. It pulled. The surface broke open with a soft hiss, and pale shapes rose from belly bodies, faces half-formed, eyes wide but empty. They reached toward me, mouths moving without breath. I fought, kicked, clawed at the ground. My fingers found something solid, a zipper. My hand was pressed against tent fabric submerged just beneath the surface. I tore at it, screaming for help, but all that came back was my own voice, echoing from inside the tent. "It's okay," it said. "You're already here." Cold rushed up my throat like water filling a pipe. My vision tunneled, the lake swallowing the sound of my screams. The last thing I saw before it all went black was the reflection on the water's surface, me, standing beside Ryan, both of us smiling. They found my car 2 months later, doors locked, headlights dead. The ranger report said the lake level had dropped by several feet. They also noted a new campsite on the north bank, Red Tent Point. Locals say every year a new tent appears there, zipped from the inside. If you ever camp near Lake Iliamna and find a tent already set up, don't open it. Someone's already waiting for you inside. You probably won't believe this, but the first time I realized something was wrong at Glacier Ridge Lodge was because of a single toothbrush. It was mint green, sitting in the same cup by the same sink, every morning. For 3 days straight. The lodge sits near Mindenhall, Glacier, one of those tourist gems that gets booked solid in summer. I worked the winter off-season, when the crowds thinned and only the most adventurous guests came through. My shift started at 10 p.m. and ran till sunrise. Mostly I checked boiler temps, cleaned the lobby, and made coffee for the early hikers. There were only 4 rooms occupied that week. Room 12, the older couple from Oregon. Room 7, a solo photographer named Lyle. Room 9, 2 friends on a ski trip. And room 3, a man who checked in under a Marks. I never saw him come or go, but his key was always gone from the rack. The first night was normal. I walked the halls, logged temps, and watched the snow drift across the windows like static. Around 2 a.m., the front door's sensor chimed 3 times in a row. I looked up, expecting to see someone entering, but no one was there. The glass doors opened halfway, then stopped. The cold that poured in was wrong too still, too heavy. The security monitor blinked static, then cleared. For half a second, I saw a figure standing in the lobby, tall, blurry, back turned. When I looked up, the lobby was empty again. I told myself it was interference. Old wiring. Easy enough to believe when you're alone miles from town, with only the sound of wind and pipes creaking through the night. The next day, the cleaning staff mentioned something strange. Room 3 hadn't been touched, but the bed looked slept in. Towels used, sink damp, that mint green toothbrush in the cup. Nobody had seen the guest. I checked the registration log. No phone number, no credit card on file, just the handwritten note paid in advance. I thought about calling the manager, but he hated disturbances, said the lodge had quirks from its old foundation. That night, the elevator started moving on its own. I heard the ding around 1:30 a.m., footsteps echoing down the hall. The motion sensors picked up heat signatures near room 3, but the hallway cameras showed nothing. Around 3, I saw light under the door of room 3. The TV was flickering inside. I knocked gently. No answer. I called out, "Mr. Marks, everything okay?" The TV clicked off. Then, from the other end of the hall, the elevator dinged again. I turned and saw someone inside, tall, wearing a coat slick with meltwater, head tilted low. I blinked, and the doors closed. When I reached the lobby, the elevator stood empty, but the carpet was wet, dripping wet, like someone had come in from a blizzard, except it hadn't snowed that night. I followed the trail of wet footprints. They led straight through the hallway, stopping outside room 3. The light inside flickered once, then went dark. I crouched, heart pounding, and listened. Breathing, slow, steady, coming from just beyond the door. When I reached for the handle, the door creaked open on its own. The room was empty, the bed perfectly made, but the air was freezing, colder than the corridor. The toothbrush was still there, rimed with frost. Then I heard a voice, so faint I thought I imagined it. A man's voice, whispering from the vent above the bed. "Check them out." I stepped closer, shining my flashlight at the vent. Frost spread across the metal grill as the whisper came again, this time sharper. "They never leave." The TV flicked on by itself, showing the lodge's security feed, each camera looping footage of empty hallways. Except in one of them, the lobby camera, there were people standing at the counter. 4 of them, frozen still, all the guests. When I looked back at the monitor, a 5th figure had joined them, standing behind the desk, wearing my uniform, smiling directly at the camera. I don't know how long I stared at that screen. The version of me on the monitor didn't move, just kept smiling at the camera. The feed flickered, and when it cleared, he was gone. The lobby was empty again. I told myself it was a glitch. The system was old, running on analog wiring that iced over every winter. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the room was too quiet afterward, like even the hum of the vents had died. When dawn came, I waited for the manager, Harold, to relieve me. He was late. I finally found him in the maintenance corridor, checking the boiler pressure. I told him about the strange footage, the missing guest, the wet footprints. He didn't even look surprised, just stared at the ground and muttered, "Room 3 again." Apparently, the room had a history. According to him, The lodge used to be a hospital during the 1950s, before they turned it into a tourist lodge. That section rooms 1 through 6 was part of the original structure. He said patients died there all the time. Hypothermia, frostbite, pulmonary failure. They'd been brought in from the glacier for observation before being shipped to Juneau. But that wasn't the worst part. He said every few years, a guest checked in under the name Marks, always paid in cash, always disappeared without a trace. And after each time, the lodge lost power in that wing for exactly 3 nights. I thought he was joking until I saw the logbook myself, buried under years of dust in the back office. The handwriting was always different, but the name of Marks appeared every few pages, stretching back decades. That night, I came in early to watch the cameras before the power could cut out again. The guests were still in their rooms, at least according to the key tags. But when I called room 7, the photographer's room, the phone rang once and disconnected itself. A few minutes later, the elevator started again. Same pattern, a ding, doors opening, no one there. Then the wet footprints appeared, tracking down the hall, past the front desk, toward the stairwell. I followed them with the flashlight trembling in my hand. They stopped in front of the basement door. The handle was cold enough to burn my skin. The basement wasn't on any of the blueprints I'd seen, but Harold had mentioned a storage level below the lobby. Old hospital leftovers, sealed decades ago. I shouldn't have gone down there. I know that now. The air hit me first wet, metallic, like old blood and ice melt. My flashlight beam barely cut through the dark. Rows of cots lined the concrete floor, each with a number tag. Some still had sheets, frozen stiff like glass dot, and at the far end, illuminated by a single emergency bulb, was a figure sitting upright on one of the beds. I said, "Sir, are you okay?" The man didn't respond. He just stared at the wall, unmoving. I took a step closer. His head turned slightly, joints creaking. Skin gray-white, lips blue. He looked exactly like the driver's license photo on file for a Marks. I stumbled back, but the floor beneath me cracked thin, ice breaking underfoot. The temperature plunged instantly. I could see my breath again. That's when the PA system turned on, even though we hadn't used it in years. Harold's voice, low and hollow. "They're checking out tonight." The lights flickered, and every cot in the room began to move slowly, sitting upright, as if waking from sleep. I ran for the stairs, slamming the door behind me. Heart pounding so hard it hurt. When I reached the lobby, every key tag was gone from the board. Every single one. The desk bell rang once, sharp and clean. I turned toward the counter, and for just a second, saw something behind it, someone standing exactly where I should have been, head tilted, smiling. When I grabbed the guest registry to call the police, I found the newest entry already written in shaky handwriting. Night manager, A. Marks. I didn't write my name in that log. I swear I didn't. But there it was, a Marks, written in the same pale gray ink as the original signatures. The page felt damp under my fingertips, like the paper had been sitting in the cold too long. I tore the page out, threw it in the trash, and told myself I was leaving. I didn't care about the job, the paycheck, the lodge. I just needed to get off that mountain. But when I stepped outside, the parking lot was gone. Just a blank field of snow stretching into the fog. No tire tracks, no road, no horizon. I went back in. The doors closed behind me, with a sound like ice fracturing. The lights in the lobby had dimmed to a dull orange glow, though I hadn't touched the dimmer. The front counter bell started ringing again, slowly at first, then faster, like someone tapping impatiently. I walked toward it, pulse hammering. The registry book had opened by itself, turned to the last page. New names were appearing one by one in shaky, uneven handwriting. Room 12 vacant, room 7 vacant, room 9 vacant, room 3 occupied. I ran for the hall. The doors to the guest rooms were all open now. The beds stripped, Floors wet, walls dripping condensation like melting ice. The air smelled like hospital disinfectant and freezer burn. Room 3's door was half closed, light flickering inside. I pushed it open with my flashlight ready. The bed was made, the toothbrush still there. Frost rimed the edges of the mirror. And then, in the reflection, I saw the guests. All 4 of them stood behind me expressionless, skin pale, water dripping from their clothes. The old couple, the photographer, the skiers, each one with a room key hanging from their necks. Their mouths opened, but no breath came out. I turned around. The room was empty. Then the radio on my belt crackled to life. Harold's voice again. "Front desk," it said softly. "They're ready to check out." I ran back down the hallway, shouting his name. The elevator doors opened as I passed. Inside stood Harold. At least, it looked like him. His uniform was soaked through, skin the color of candle wax. "You're late," he said. "Guests don't like to wait." The doors shut before I could move. I slammed the emergency button, but the power died instantly. The generator outside groaned, sputtered, and fell silent. When the backup lights flicked on, the lodge looked different. The wallpaper peeled away, revealing hospital tiles beneath. Metal gurneys lined the hallway, where furniture should have been. The air smelled of iodine and decay. Room numbers had changed too. Every door now read 3. I stumbled into the lobby again, desperate for a way out. The front windows were completely iced over, frost so thick it looked like marble. My breath clouded the air as I shouted for help, for anyone, but the sound barely carried. Then the bell rang one final time. Behind the desk, the monitor came alive, showing the feed of the lobby again. The figure behind the counter was back, wearing my uniform, smiling. Only this time, he wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at me. I stepped closer. On the monitor, he did the same. Every movement mirrored perfectly. I raised my flashlight. He raised his. But the reflection was slower, half a second behind. And then, without me moving, my reflection leaned forward and pressed the bell. The sound echoed through the entire lodge. The lights went out. When they came back, the monitor showed a new feed. 4 guests standing in the lobby, handing their keys to the man behind the counter. My uniform, my face. The phone on the desk rang once. I answered it, even though my hand was shaking so bad I could barely hold the receiver. Glacier Ridge Lodge. Night manager speaking, a voice said. My voice, checking in. Static swallowed the line. The lights flickered once more, then everything went silent. They found the lodge empty 3 days later. No guests, no staff. The registry book on the counter had one final entry. Room 3A. Mark's night manager. If you ever stay near Mendenhall and see Glacier Ridge Lodge listed online, don't book it. The phone number still works, but whoever answers always says the same thing. Welcome back. Mr. Marks, room 3 is ready for you. You probably won't believe this, but I've flown tourists over Alaskan glaciers for 15 years, and I've never lost a group until last winter. Their names don't matter. What matters is that the footage they left behind wasn't human. It started like any other day. Low clouds, temperatures hovering around 15 degrees, visibility good enough to fly. I ran a charter service out of Anchorage single-engine helicopters for sightseeing and photography tours. That morning, a family of 3 and a young couple booked the Mendenhall Ice Cave package. 6 passengers total. They were friendly, normal. The father joked about hoping to see polar bears, even though they don't live that far south. The flight to the glacier took about 40 minutes. From above, the ice looked alive, blue veins pulsing under the surface, cracks widening and closing like breath. We landed on a flat section near the entrance to one of the caves, where meltwater pooled into glassy reflections. I waited outside the chopper while they went in with their guide, a local named Travis. I've worked with him for years, steady guy, doesn't take chances. The group had 2 GoPros mounted, 2 helmets, standard practice for these excursions. Everything was routine until the radio cut out. Usually you'll lose signal under the ice, but not entirely. I tried their channel, static, switched to emergency frequency, nothing. Even my GPS froze for a moment, like the system couldn't locate itself anymore. After 20 minutes, I started to worry. I called in to base, told them I'd wait another 10, then head in if they didn't come back. The weather started changing fast, sky going that strange white-gray. That means a storm's forming over the ridge. Finally, I saw someone coming out of the cave. Travis. He wasn't running, but he wasn't walking right either, moving like he was being pulled forward. His hands were stiff at his sides, eyes locked on something behind me. I waved and shouted, but he didn't respond. Then I realized his jacket was soaked through, but not from melt. The fabric was covered in frost-thick white layers of it, even though the air wasn't cold enough for that. When he got close, I saw his lips moving. Tiny, breathless sounds. I leaned in to hear him. "They're still in there," he whispered. "Don't look." Before I could ask what he meant, the wind picked up. A deep, hollow vibration rolled out of the cave, not like air or water, but something heavier. The ice around the entrance shimmered, then darkened, as if a shadow was spreading inside it. Travis turned back toward the cave, started walking in again. I grabbed his arm, but his skin was like glass smooth, slick, freezing. He didn't look at me. He just said, "It saw them." Then he stepped back into the dark. The others never came out. I waited until the storm forced me to take off, but the cave mouth looked different, by the narrower. The ice rearranged like it had grown overnight. I radioed search and rescue the next morning. They sent a team 2 days later, when the weather cleared. They found the cave, but it didn't match the coordinates I gave. It had moved more than a quarter-mile uphill, and the tunnel inside had collapsed completely. All they found was a single GoPro, frozen halfway into the ice. They had to cut it out with heat tools. The footage started normal tourists, laughing, walking deeper, light bouncing off ice walls. Then they started hearing something behind them, like movement inside the glacier. Something rhythmic. When one of them pointed the camera back down the tunnel, the ice wasn't blue anymore. It was black dot, and when the guide said, "Let's go back," the camera caught a reflection behind them. At first, it looked like another person, but it wasn't. It was something enormous, stretched wrong, crawling beneath the surface of the ice. When the footage cuts out, the last frame shows the ice cracking apart and something pressing its hand against the inside, as if trying to get out. I didn't sleep for 3 days after watching that footage. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the reflection, something enormous, sliding just beneath the ice, pale and stretched like muscle under translucent skin. The recovery team handed the GoPro over to the troopers, but they sent me a digital copy since I'd been the one to file the report. I shouldn't have kept it, but I did. I played it frame by frame, trying to rationalize it. Lighting trick, pareidolia, maybe ice distortion. But no, there was something moving behind that wall, reacting to the people in front of it. At one point, when the couple stopped to take a selfie, a faint shape leaned closer from inside the glacier, like it was studying them. The ice fogged where its face would have been, as though it exhaled. On the audio track, there was a faint hum. It wasn't wind or feedback, it had structure, a slow, looping rhythm, almost like breathing, but too deep, too slow. When I analyzed the waveform, it repeated every 11 seconds. Perfectly. That's not random. That's intent. The official story came out the next week. Avalanche collapse. Bodies unrecoverable. Unstable ice conditions. Same canned line they always use. But the families didn't buy it. Neither did I. 2 days later, a woman showed up at the hangar, asking about the flight. She was one of the missing passengers, sisters, a journalist. Said she got my name from a mutual contact in Juneau PD. She had a file folder under her arm, and this hollow, sleepless look in her eyes. She told me something that made my stomach drop. Their family tracker app had pinged her brother's phone after the incident 3 pings, each one further north, over terrain where no signal should have reached. The last ping was logged 48 hours after the official avalanche. I didn't believe her until she showed me the coordinates. They matched the location of another glacier one that doesn't have public tours. Doesn't even have a name on the FAA charts. Just an alphanumeric designation, G-23. She begged me to fly her there. I should have refused. Every instinct said no. But I couldn't stop thinking about Travis walking back into that cave, about what he'd said. It saw them. We took off that night, under clear skies. I told myself it was just reconnaissance, nothing more. The flight path was smooth until the final 20 miles. Then the compass began to spin full rotations, as if we'd entered some kind of magnetic void. The GPS screen flickered, then went black. Only the altimeter worked, and even that started jittering. The world below us was white and endless. No terrain features, no shadows, nothing. Then, suddenly, a shape appeared, massive, bluish-black, like a scar across the glacier. We circled once. From above, the ice seemed to pulse. That's when the hum started, again this time over the radio. Even though it was turned off, the same 11-second rhythm from the footage. I killed the power to the comms, but it didn't stop. The journalist was staring out the window, whispering, "There, right there," pointing at a fissure near the glacier's center. I looked and saw movement, not under the ice this time. On it, something was crawling across the surface, pushing aside snow as it moved. Long, thin limbs, almost serpentine, jointed backward like insect legs. My stomach turned. I banked hard to pull us away, but the engine coughed, sputtered, and died midair. We were gliding over a glacier with no lift, no power, nothing but gravity pulling us toward that black scar below. She was screaming, clutching the GoPro like a lifeline, yelling that she could see them inside the ice. I didn't look. I couldn't. The last thing I remember before we hit was the hum, louder now, so deep it vibrated in my bones. Then everything went white. When I woke up, the helicopter was half buried in ice sand. The passenger door stood open, leading straight into a tunnel that hadn't been there before. I came to with a taste of blood in my mouth and the smell of antifreeze in the air. The rotor blades were bent like wilted metal pedals. My headset was still crackling, no voices, just that low, pulsing hum. Snow dusted the cockpit, light as ash. The windshield was spiderwebbed, and outside, nothing moved. The journalist's seat was empty. Her door hung open, leading into a tunnel that shimmered with pale blue light. I yelled her name. The sound didn't echo it, just stopped, swallowed. I knew I should have stayed in the wreck, waited for rescue. But the radio was dead, and some part of me was sure rescue would never come. I took a flare, a flashlight, and followed the footprints leading away from the crash. Bare footprints. The tunnel walls glistened like glass, veins of darker blue running deep inside. Sometimes I thought I saw movement behind them, shadows shifting, like something swimming through the ice. The hum grew louder the deeper I went, matching my heartbeat. After what felt like 10 minutes, the tunnel widened into a chamber. The air was humid, mist curling above the ice floor. In the middle was the journalist, standing perfectly still, facing the wall. Her flashlight lay at her feet, beam frozen on the ice. I called to her again. She didn't move. When I stepped closer, I saw what she was staring at. The ice in front of her wasn't solid anymore, it was translucent, and beneath it, shapes moved. Human shapes? I could make out faces, pressed against the ice. Mouths open, eyes rolling slowly, like they were dreaming underwater. I saw the couple from the tour, the family, Travis. Their hands twitched, fingers scraping faintly against the barrier. The journalist whispered, "They're still alive." She pressed her palm to the ice. The hum spiked, vibrating through the floor and up into my teeth. The faces turned toward her, every single one, moving in unison. Their mouths opened wider, and for the first time I heard a sound not from the air, but from inside the glacier. Voices, hundreds, maybe thousands, layered together, all repeating one word, under. The ice began to crack beneath her hand. I shouted, pulled her back, but the surface splintered like glass. Water surged up from beneath, freezing mid-air as it hit the cold. I grabbed her arm and ran, the sound chasing us deep, rhythmic, like a heartbeat made of thunder. We didn't make it far. The tunnel ahead wasn't the same one we came through. It twisted downward, the light changing from blue to black. My flashlight flickered. For one instant, I saw the walls moving, no breathing. The glacier was alive, flexing around us like lungs. She screamed. Something long and white coiled out of the darkness, wrapping around her legs. I tried to pull her free, but it dragged her down so fast I didn't even see her hit the floor. The hum rose to a deafening roar, and for a moment I saw it, the thing beneath the ice. It wasn't one creature. It was thousands of them. Bodies fused together under layers of frozen glass, shifting as one. Hands, faces, ribs, all woven into a single, endless mass. Every time a new person touched the ice, they became part of it, absorbed, consumed. I ran until the light behind me vanished. I don't remember climbing out. I just remember collapsing on the snow, the world completely white again. Rescue came 2 days later. They found me half frozen beside the wreck. No sign of the journalist. I told them not to go down there. They didn't listen. The new search team went in a week later. None of them came back. A month afterward, I got an anonymous email. No text, no sender, just a video attachment. The thumbnail was pitch black. I almost deleted it. I wish I had. It was the journalist's GoPro feed. The first few seconds were static. Then, faintly, the ice came into view, blue and glowing. The lens tilted upward, showing her reflection, except it wasn't her anymore. It was me. They grounded me after that, revoked my license. But sometimes, at night, my radio still turns itself on, and through the static, I hear that slow, deep voice whispering the same word it taught them all, under. You probably won't believe this, but my sister's last phone call didn't sound like her. Same number, same voice, but wrong. There was something off in the rhythm of it, like she was repeating herself, a few seconds delayed. Her name was Emily. She drove freight for a subcontractor. Nothing fancy, food supplies, camping gear, sometimes mail between Fairbanks and Deadhorse. She knew the Dalton Highway better than anyone I'd met, called it her second spine. When she vanished, everyone assumed it was weather or fatigue. That road eats drivers, but I've seen her dashcam footage. I know that's not what happened. Her last transmission came through on a Sunday night, early December. I was at my apartment in Anchorage when she called. Her voice was calm, steady, but she said she'd taken a wrong turn somewhere near mile 212. One of those service spurs that don't show on GPS. She said the road looked new. I remember laughing, telling her that wasn't possible, that nothing new gets built up there without half the state knowing. She laughed too. Then the line crackled, and her voice warped into static. Before it cut, she said one last thing. There's another truck behind me, same model, same plates. After that, silence. Her rig was found 2 days later, parked perfectly on the shoulder, engine idling, lights still on, doors locked. Her phone was on the seat, recording. The file was almost 4 hours long. When I pressed play, I thought it was broken. It was just static at first, then faint breathing. Occasionally, you could hear her mutter something, half asleep maybe. But an hour in, the sound shifted. The breathing doubled, layered over itself, echoing slightly, like someone was recording her from outside the cab and feeding the sound back. At 2 hours, the door handle clicked, once, then again. Then a voice Hurst spoke from the passenger seat. "You shouldn't have followed me." Only she was alone. That's when I called the troopers. They said they'd already searched the truck, that it was clean. No signs of struggle. They didn't mention the audio though. When I asked if they heard it, the officer on the phone went quiet. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Sometimes that highway echoes. You shouldn't listen too long." I drove up there myself 3 days later. The Dalton was all frost and silence, just an endless white line between pine and permafrost. I found the spot easily. The rig was still there, sealed in a chain-link impound. The snow around it hadn't melted, but it had shifted, like something heavy had moved beneath it. The night I arrived, I booked a room at a truck stop near Coldfoot. The owner was a grizzled guy named Marius. When I mentioned my sister, his face went pale. He said he remembered her cheerful, polite, tipped him with coffee beans she roasted herself. He leaned close and said, "You shouldn't have come up here for her." When I pressed him, he said that over the past 20 years, a handful of drivers had disappeared around that same mile marker. Always in the same way, vehicles found running, no sign of struggle. All electronics wiped except one recording, each one ending with the same sound. He wouldn't play it for me, but I found it online later, through a forum of Alaskan truckers. The clip was 37 seconds long. At the 20-second mark, a second voice identical to the driver's whispers over the original. Not an echo, not distortion, perfect imitation. I went back to my motel and listened to Emily's recording again, headphones in, volume low. Around 3 hours in, she starts humming. Then the second version of her hums too, a fraction of a second later. It syncs up. Then the real her stops. The copy doesn't. The final line before the audio cuts is her whispering, "If you hear me on the radio, don't answer." That night, my CB came alive for the first time in years, static clearing just long enough for a familiar voice to say, "You found me, didn't you?" I didn't tell anyone what I heard that night. I just sat there in the dark motel room, staring at the CB like it might start breathing. The voice was faint but clear, Millie's cadence, her tone. Only, she hadn't called me by my name. She called me by hers. You found me, didn't you?" I didn't respond. I turned the knob until the static drowned her out, then unplugged the radio completely. Still, I didn't sleep. I just sat by the window, watching the highway cut through the snow like a gray vein. Every set of headlights looked like hers. Dawn. I drove back to mile 212. The sun was barely up, pale and cold, stretching over endless white. The impound fence was easy to climb. The padlock was a joke. Emily's rig sat there, quiet as a grave, frost climbing the windshield like fingers. Inside, everything was untouched. Her gloves on the dash, a thermos half full of coffee, now frozen solid. I sat in the driver's seat and pressed the ignition. Engine coughed, then started like it had been waiting. The CB light flickered on by itself. Channel 19. I didn't touch it. Static for a few seconds. Then, "Don't drive yet. It's still out there." My throat closed up. The voice was hers again, my sister's. Clear as day. I whispered, "Where are you?" "Behind you," she said. I turned so fast, I slammed my elbow into the door. Nothing there. Just the snow outside, swirling faintly. The radio crackled again, her voice weaker this time. "It follows the sound. Turn it off." The line went dead. I should have left right then. But I needed answers, needed to see what had taken her. I drove north, past the marker, onto the same unlisted road she'd mentioned, the one that wasn't supposed to exist. The map showed nothing, but the road was there. Pale gravel beneath the ice, tire tracks leading forward into a stand of dead spruce. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No wind, no birds, not even the hum of my tires. The snow looked untouched until I saw them dot tracks. a pair of boot prints leading down the middle of the road. I stopped, climbed out, followed them on foot. The air felt thicker with every step, like walking underwater. The tracks ended abruptly at a patch of dark ice. Beneath it, faint outlines like hands pressed upward from below. I dropped to my knees, brushing snow away. The ice was translucent enough to see faces underneath. Dozens of them, and one of them looked like Emily. Her mouth was open, like she was trying to speak, but her eyes were closed. Frost rimmed her eyelashes. I hit the ice with my flashlight handle until the beam cracked. The sound echoed down the road like thunder. That's when the radio in the truck turned back on by itself. Through the open door, I could hear voices. Not one, not 2 dozens, all layered over each other. Some were deep, some higher, but all saying the same thing: keep driving. I ran back, slammed the door, and threw the truck into reverse. The CB light blinked erratically. I turned it off. It turned itself back on. Static. Then Emily again. You shouldn't have come. It copies whoever listens. Something moved in the rearview mirror. A shadow in the middle of the road, walking toward me, slow and deliberate. Same height, same jacket as my sister. I floored the gas. The tires screamed over ice, the figure shrinking in the mirror until the fog swallowed it. I didn't stop until I saw the main highway again. Heart pounding so hard I couldn't tell if it was me or the truck shaking. When I parked back at the truck stop, the CB was still glowing. The screen displayed a single line of text, something the model shouldn't be able to do. Welcome back, Emily. That night, I destroyed the radio butt at 3:17 a.m. My phone lit up on its own, flashing an incoming call from me, Dalton CB, Channel 19. I didn't pick up the call at first. Just stared at the screen until it went dark. Me Dalton, CB Channel 19. Not possible. Not a contact in my phone, not a service name, nothing that should have existed. I powered the phone off, pulled the battery, and shoved it under the motel pillow, like that would stop it. But the screen lit up again, battery still out. The same number flashed once, then vanished. That was the last moment I could pretend it was anything ordinary. The next morning, I drove south. I told myself I was leaving, going home, cutting my losses. Half an hour down the highway, the engine sputtered and died. The dashboard lights flickered like dying candles. When I stepped outside, the air was too still again. Sound swallowed like snow had plugged my ears. That's when the radio in the truck, the one I'd torn from the dash and thrown in the back seat, crackled to life. No power, no battery. Still humming. You said you wouldn't listen. A voice whispered. It was Emily, not a recording live. The words were new, not anything from the old file. I slammed the door and backed away, but her voice followed, coming through the static like wind through a keyhole. You came up here because you couldn't stop hearing me. That's how it starts. I looked back down the highway. The air shimmered slightly, heedless, bending the horizon. For a second, I saw something standing in the middle of the road, a silhouette, shaped like my sister, holding a CB mic. Then it split. The image doubled, one version walking forward, the other standing still. I got in the truck, forced the ignition again. The engine coughed, caught. I drove fast, too fast, but the road kept stretching. The mile markers stopped changing. 200, 202, then 209 again. I was looping. I thought I was losing it, until I noticed the snow patterns, same patches, same cracks, same shadows. I wasn't moving at all. The truck's odometer climbed, but the world outside didn't change. The CB crackled again. You're close now, she said. Almost home. I grabbed the mic and screamed. Where are you? Right here, she said. Behind you. Something shifted in the back seat. I turned, flashlight shaking in my hand. The torn-out CB unit was sitting upright, cord hanging loose, but the mic wasn't attached anymore. The sound was still coming through, though. Stop driving. Look at the snow. I did. For a second, I saw tire tracks beside mine fresh, same tread pattern. A second truck running parallel to me, matching my speed perfectly. Though there was nothing there, the voice on the radio kept talking. You think you can find me? But it's already found you. The world outside dimmed, not like nightfall, more like a filter closing over my eyes. The snow grew darker, almost metallic, reflecting faint red light. When I blinked, the road vanished completely. The only thing left was static hand breathing. I must have blacked out. When I woke, it was daylight again. My truck sat in the middle of the road, engine dead, frost climbing the windows. No other vehicles in sight. I checked my phone still off. The time showed to 12 p.m., the same number as her last. Known mile marker. In the passenger seat sat her thermos. The same one they found in her truck. It wasn't frozen anymore. Steam rose from the lid. The CB was gone. In its place, a small digital recorder blinked red. I pressed play. Static for 10 seconds. Then my voice speaking softly. I found her. She says it's my turn to drive. The recording ended with the sound of a truck door opening and closing. Then the engine starting. I left the Dalton Highway that afternoon, or I thought I did. But when I reached the next junction, the sign said mile 212 again. The snow hadn't been disturbed. I saw the glint of headlights behind me, the same make and model as my truck, keeping perfect distance. Now, when I sleep, I hear the CB come on in dreams. Always the same voice, always calm. Keep driving 'em. You'll get home this time. They say that Dalton swallows travelers whole. But sometimes, if you drive far enough north, you'll hear someone calling through the static, someone with your exact voice, asking for directions back home. You probably won't believe this, but I started hearing the knocking on my second week out on the lake. I thought it was the ice shifting, that low, hollow thud that comes when the temperature drops fast. Every fisherman hears it. But this wasn't random. It was rhythmic. I'd taken a seasonal job maintaining the cabins and shacks around Lake Minchumina, about 180 miles northwest of Fairbanks. In winter, the ice thickens to almost 5 feet, strong enough to drive trucks over. My boss Vince ran a small rental outfit, 12 shacks on the lake, all outfitted with bunks, heaters, and a hole in the floor for fishing. Most nights were dead quiet. No wind, no animals, just the creak of frozen wood and the distant groan of the ice. I liked it that way. Out there, solitude feels like medicine. One night, mid-January, I was alone in shack number 8. Vince had headed back to town for supplies, leaving me to close out the last few clients. I stoked the stove, dropped my line into the hole, and settled in with a thermos of coffee. Around 11 p.m., the temperature dropped fast, 15 degrees in under an hour. That's when I heard it. 3 slow knocks. From beneath the ice. At first I laughed. Sound travels weird through frozen water. I figured it was a fissure or air pocket collapsing. But then, it came again, same rhythm, same spacing. Knock, knock, knock. I tapped back with the end of my ice auger. 3 beats. A pause. Then 3 knocks again. Perfectly mirrored. That was the first moment my hands started shaking. I checked under the shack, crawling on my stomach with a flashlight. The ice looked solid. No cracks. No movement. I even held the light over the hole. The beam vanished into dark blue water. No more than a shimmer of particles drifting down. Then I heard a voice, just a whisper, faint and muffled through the floor. Cold, down here. I scrambled back and slammed the hatch shut. My heart was beating so hard I thought I'd faint. I sat there for minutes, just listening. Nothing. Total silence again, except the pop of the stove. Around 2 a.m., it started again, but louder this time. Knock, 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 knock. Knock, 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 knock. It wasn't random. It was a pattern. Like it was learning. I grabbed the radio and called Vince. The signal cracked with static, but his voice came through, half asleep and annoyed. I told him someone was under the ice, maybe trapped. He laughed. "No one's out there but you, kid. Don't lose your mind." He hung up. The next hour, I couldn't sit still. I kept pacing, flashlight shaking in my hand, staring at the hole. It looked deeper than before, like the water had receded, or maybe the light wasn't reaching as far. When I leaned over it again, I heard breathing, not mine, slow, steady, coming from deep below. I ran outside, gasping from the cold, snow crunching under my boots. The wind had died completely. The stars hung low, reflecting on the frozen lake like glass. I stomped toward shack number 7, where Vince had said some tourists stayed earlier that week. Their shack door was still chained shut, no footprints, but the ice around it was warp-tripled like something heavy had pressed against it from underneath. Back inside my own shack, the knocking was louder, closer. The floorboards were vibrating. The hole's edges had started to crack outward, spidering across the planks. I dropped to my knees, staring down, whispering, "What are you?" For a few seconds, the lake went silent. Then a single pale hand pressed up against the underside of the ice. Fingers splayed, palm facing me. When I touched the ice, the knocking stopped, but my reflection in the water smiled back and kept tapping. I didn't sleep after that. Couldn't? The image of that hand under the ice kept looping in my mind. Pale skin stretched thin, veins dark and blue, nails scraping faintly against the frozen layer that separated it from me. I kept telling myself I'd imagined it, that my flashlight had glared off the water. That cold can make you hallucinate. But then I saw the cracks. They'd spread overnight. Thin white lines running from the hole toward the walls like the boards under my cot creaked, as if something beneath was pushing upward. Every few minutes, the knocking started again. Never loud, always deliberate. 3 knocks, then silence. Then a second set of knocks, from somewhere farther away, like it was calling to others. By morning, I packed my gear and radioed Vince. Static. No response. I tried again and again, adjusting the antenna, shouting into the mic until my throat hurt. Finally, I switched frequencies. That's when a voice came through. It wasn't Vince. "It's warmer here," it whispered, the tone slow and warped, like speech underwater. I dropped the radio so hard it cracked. I needed to leave. I pulled on my parka and stepped outside, but the snow looked wrong, too smooth. No texture, no tracks, like a photograph. Even the air felt thicker, harder to breathe. When I tried walking toward the tree line, the horizon didn't move. It was like I was walking in place. Then I heard the knock again. Not from beneath this time, but from inside one of the other shacks. 3 knocks. A pause. Then 3 more. "Vince?" I shouted, but no answer came. I moved toward shack number 5. The door was ajar. Inside, it was colder than the outside air, frost creeping up the walls like ivy. The fishing hole was open, water black and still. I noticed a boot near the hole, half frozen to the floor. The other boot was gone. Something rippled in the water, not big, just enough to make a ring spread outward, slow and steady. Then I saw the rope. A line ran from the edge of the hole down into the darkness, tied to something below. I pulled it. It moved easily at first, then caught. I tugged harder. Whatever was on the end jerked suddenly, pulling back, once, twice, then it knocked on the floor. I screamed and dropped the line, backing out of the shack, slipping on the ice. The door slammed shut behind me. Even though there was no wind by dusk, I'd locked myself inside my own shack again. The temperature had dropped another 20 degrees. Frost coated everything. The stove was struggling to stay lit, and the lake was groaning beneath me, deep and heavy, like something massive shifting far below. I tried to stay awake. sitting on the cot with the lantern burning low. At some point, I dozed off. When I woke up, the knocking wasn't beneath the ice anymore. It was on the wall. Knock, 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 knock. I froze. Then it circled to the other wall. Knock, knock, knock. Each hit was stronger, sharper. The boards rattled. The stove clanged against the floor. Then, from directly beneath me, I heard my own voice whisper through the cracks in the floorboards. "It's cold up there, isn't it?" I stood and shouted, "What do you want?" The knocking stopped. The silence that followed felt worse. Then, faintly, the voice answered, still mine, still muffled, "To trade." The hole began to bubble, ice hissing around the edges. Steam rose, smelling like wet metal. A shape moved below, slowly rising. I grabbed the lantern and leaned over, under the ice. Staring straight up was my face. When I backed away, the reflection climbed closer to the surface and whispered, "You've been down here long enough. Let me breathe." It's strange what panic does to you. You don't think, you just move. I grabbed the lantern, the radio, and the ice auger, and backed against the far wall. The reflection under the ice was moving upward, like it was swimming through glass. Its eyes were wide open, same color as mine, but dull, milked over. Its mouth opened and closed like it was mouthing something, each word matching my breathing. A half second out of sync, I shouted again, "What are you?" It smiled, my exact smile, and answered from beneath the ice, "You." The floor cracked beneath my boots. I lunged for the door, but the lock was frozen solid. I hit it with the auger, wood splintering under the metal, but the knocking started again, faster now. Dozens of strikes from all directions. The whole shack shuddered. I could hear more voices joining in, low and inhuman, blending into one continuous hum. Outside, the wind had returned, screaming across the lake. The sound of it mixed with the pounding below until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Then, silence. When I turned back toward the fishing hole, the surface of the ice was smooth again, clear. My reflection was still there, but this time, it wasn't mirroring me. It was kneeling, hands pressed against the ice, head tilted like a curious animal. I held the lantern over the hole. The flame flickered. That's when the reflection moved first. It tilted its head the other way, then raised one hand and touched the underside of the ice, perfectly aligned with mine. My fingers tingled, numb instantly. I jerked my hand away, but frost bloomed across my palm in the shape of its touch. The ice began to thin, glowing faintly from beneath. Something was coming through. I did the only thing that made sense. I jammed the auger through the hole. The blade hit something soft, then hard, then gave. The entire shack shook violently. The ice below erupted, spraying shards and freezing water across the floor, and then the hand shot up mine, but not mine. Paler, boneless, skin slick like fish scales. It grabbed my wrist, cold so sharp it burned. I screamed, swung the lantern, shattered it across the floor. Fire spread instantly, licking up the boards, eating the dry wood. The thing pulled again, harder, but I dropped flat, slamming my boot against its wrist until I heard it snap. The arm recoiled, vanishing beneath the water. I crawled for the door, smoke choking me, heat and cold mixing until I couldn't tell them apart. The fire spread fast. The walls moaned as the ice below melted unevenly. I hit the door one last time, shoulder first, and it gave. I stumbled out into the storm, coughing, snow blinding me. Behind me, the shack went up in flames, orange light reflected in the endless white. I ran until I couldn't hear the cracking anymore. When I finally looked back, shack number 8 was gone, nothing but a plume of steam rising from the lake. Already freezing over again, I collapsed near the tree line. My right hand was blistered where it had touched the ice. The frost mark, the print was still there, faint and gray, like something burned from the inside out. Vince found me the next morning, half conscious, skin blue. he said when he went out to check the shacks. They were all empty, doors hanging open, holes iced over. Every one of them had cracks radiating outward from the center, like something had been pressing from below. I told him to burn the rest, and to his credit, he did. The whole operation shut down that winter. The lake's been closed ever since, but every night since then, around 2 a.m., I hear the same sound echoing through my trailer floor, 3 slow knocks, then a pause. Sometimes, if I listen closely enough, I hear my own voice whisper back through the wood. It's warmer down here. I survived the lake, but it didn't let me go. The frost mark on my palm never faded on. Sometimes, when I hold it over water, it knocks back. You probably won't believe this, but the first time I filmed the aurora over Nome, I thought I'd captured the best content of my life. It wasn't until I played the footage back that I realized something inside the lights was looking at me. I run a travel vlog, not a huge one, maybe 100,000 subscribers, but enough to pay for gear, gas, and cheap hotels. Last winter, I flew to Alaska to chase the northern lights. I'd done Iceland, Norway, Canada, beautiful, all of them, but Alaska was supposed to be raw, untouched, pure. I thought it'd make a perfect series, alone under the aurora. The trip started fine. I rented a cabin near Nome, 3 miles from the main road, no neighbors, no interference. The owner handed me the keys and said, half joking, if the lights talk back, don't answer. I laughed, assuming it was just small-town superstition. The first 2 nights were cloudy. Then, on the 3rd night, the sky came alive. Green ribbons unfurled across the horizon like curtains made of smoke. I set up my tripod, time-lapse rolling, microphone on. It was silent, except for the faint clicking of the camera and the crunch of my boots in the snow. Around midnight, I noticed something strange. The aurora had stopped moving. It just hung there, still as paint. That's not supposed to happen. Auroras dance, shimmer, pulse. But these lights froze mid-wave, the color dimming slightly. Then I felt it. The static. My hair lifted, every strand charged. The air tasted metallic. I remember whispering to the camera, the sky feels alive. I almost laughed at how dramatic it sounded until the temperature shifted. The wind stopped completely, and for a split second, there was silence. Not the absence of sound. A kind of pressure, like the world had been muted, and then the hum started low, distant, harmonic. It vibrated in my chest, like standing near a subwoofer. I thought it was my drone at first, but the sound wasn't coming from the equipment. It was coming from above. The aurora began to move again, but not like before. The light folded in on itself, coiling tighter until it formed a single spiral overhead. Inside that spiral, faint shapes began to appear like silhouettes, suspended in liquid light. Human shapes. I stepped back, heart racing. The camera kept rolling, but I couldn't look away. The shapes weren't random, they were facing me. I turned off the light on my headlamp, crouched low, trying to convince myself it was optical illusion, reflections, or maybe camera interference. But then one of the shapes moved out of sync with the rest. It tilted its head, slowly, and I swear to God, the entire spiral of light flickered like the aurora was reacting. I reached for my camera, trying to zoom, but the display went black. The battery indicator read 98%, yet the lens refused to focus. Then the audio feed spiked, my mic picking up a sound whispering, layered. Hundreds of voices speaking in the same soft tone. The words were unintelligible, except for one I caught clearly. Look. Against my better judgment, I did. The entire sky was alive. Every ribbon of color now had movement inside it. Hundreds of translucent shapes, drifting, twisting, changing direction in sync. They weren't random. They were forming something: circles, spirals, patterns too deliberate to be natural. Then my camera powered back on, all on its own. The screen showed the live feed, but not me. The figure on the screen was standing exactly where I was. Same posture, same camera. Only, above its head, the aurora had formed a single, glowing eye. When I finally tore my gaze away from the screen, the aurora above me had already shifted and every shape in it was facing the ground. I don't remember walking back to the cabin. I just remember the sound, this deep, steady vibration that didn't stop even after I got inside. It felt like the air was humming inside my skull. My camera battery, my drone, my phone all dead. Not low, not dying, drained. I lit a candle and sat on the floor, trying to slow my breathing. Outside, the sky glowed green, then blue, then faint red. Every few seconds, the window pane flickered with movement. When I finally worked up the nerve to peek through the curtains, the aurora had changed again. The spiral was gone. Now the light stretched into long vertical columns, pulsing in rhythm. I didn't realize it at first, but they were positioned directly over my cabin. I whispered to myself, this is just plasma, just electromagnetic particles, like saying it could make it true. But something inside me knew better. The hum grew stronger. The candle flame bent toward the window. The reflection in the glass, my reflection, wasn't synced with me anymore. It blinked half a second too late. I stumbled back, grabbing my camera. The lens flickered to life, just enough to show one frame before freezing again. The image was of the cabin door wide open, snow blowing in and a tall, faint figure standing in the doorway. Only the door was still shut. The knock came exactly 1 second later. 3 sharp taps. Not heavy measured, polite, like someone asking permission to come in. I didn't move. Another 3 knocks followed, softer this time. Then a pause. Then a single, drawn-out knock that lasted several seconds. I forced myself to the door, hand trembling on the handle. When I looked through the peephole, I saw nothing, just the aurora's light spilling over the snow. But when I turned on the porch light, the glow from above flickered, like the sky itself had blinked. I opened the door an inch. The air outside wasn't cold anymore. It was warm, humid even, like standing near the ocean in August. I stepped out barefoot, just to prove to myself the world was still real. That's when I heard my own voice behind me. Don't look up. I spun around. The cabin was empty. Then the hum turned into something else, like a melody, faint but structured. Notes, patterns, harmonies, too precise to be random. My head felt heavy, like gravity itself had shifted. The light above began to pulse in sync with the rhythm. And then I did look up. The aurora wasn't high anymore. It was close to close. The shapes inside the light had faces now. Not human exactly, but similar, smooth, elongated, luminous outlines of heads and torsos, moving as if they were swimming through air. I raised my camera again. It turned on, briefly, enough for me to see the display. The feeds showed the same shine but with one difference. The shapes in the footage weren't above me. They were behind me. I spun, but there was nothing there. Just snow. Still, the pressure in the air deepened, heavy enough to make my ears pop. My skin prickled, and every hair on my body stood on end. I stumbled back inside and slammed the door. The light through the window dimmed, but the shadows on the walls didn't match my movements anymore. They lagged, twitched. One of them lingered, even after I stopped moving. I grabbed the mic and whispered into the camera. If you see this footage, don't look directly at the aurora. It's not light. It's the power surged. The camera feed went white. For about 5 seconds, I couldn't see anything. Only the hum remained. When vision came back, I was staring at the ceiling. Lying flat on my back, the camera still recording beside me. On the screen, I could see myself but in the reflection on the window. I was still standing up when I looked outside again. There was only one column of light left and it was pointing straight down onto my cabin roof, pulsing like a heartbeat. I woke up to the sound of wind, but it wasn't real wind. It had rhythm, like breathing. Long inhale, long exhale, drawn through the trees and waves. The cabin walls creaked with each pulse. My first thought was to pack my things and get the hell out, but when I looked outside, the world wasn't dark anymore. It was glowing. The aurora had come down to the ground, not the whole. Curtains, one column of light, pale green and faintly red, twisting like mist above the snow. It hovered right outside my cabin window. Inside that glow, shapes moved slowly, as though suspended in water. Faces, torsos, eyes that never blinked. I reached for my camera. It powered on immediately. Battery full. I don't know how. I hit record, hand shaking, whispering. January 18th. Nome, Alaskan, is not an illusion. The lens flickered, then refocused. But on the screen, the light wasn't outside. It was inside the cabin. I turned around. The air rippled like heat haze, and something began to form within it, to shimmer, taking on the outline of a person. Not solid, but clear enough to see movement. "We see you," it said. The voice wasn't spoken. It vibrated through the air, directly into my skull. I fell backward, camera clattering onto the floor, still recording. The shape leaned closer. It didn't walk, it folded closer, like the light itself was rearranging space to reach me. I scrambled to my feet and ran outside barefoot, snow biting into my skin. The cold didn't hurt anymore. The aurora covered the entire sky again, moving in slow spirals. But the strangest part was the silence. There was no wind, no crunch underfoot, no sound except for the soft hum coming from above. I turned the camera toward the sky, zoomed in as far as it would go. The shapes were clearer now, hundreds, maybe thousands, drifting in long, coordinated patterns. They looked almost human, but not quite. No features, just outlines of faces made of light, and then they all stopped moving. The entire sky froze. My breath hung in front of me like smoke in still air. Then every figure turned, perfectly synchronized, and looked straight down at me. The camera feed began to shake, not from my hands, but from interference. The image warped, stretched, colors flickering between red and white. Through the distortion, a pattern began to appear in the video shapes within the static, forming symbols that looked almost like letters. I played the footage back later and slowed it frame by frame. The message spelled two words: look up. But I didn't need to, then, because I already had. The moment I lifted my head, everything went dark. Not black, just gone. No cabin, no snow, no sound. I was standing in an empty void filled with faint blue light, and the figures surrounded me on all sides, their forms stretching upward forever. They weren't speaking, not out loud. They were showing me things, flashes of memory, light, sound, images of people standing under auroras across centuries, Inuit hunters, explorers, pilots, tourists, all of them looking up, all frozen in place, their faces bathed in the same glow. And then I saw myself among them. The figure of me was standing beside the tripod, camera raised, smiling like I'd just gotten the perfect shot. Only the reflection in the lens wasn't the aurora, it was me. Hundreds of times over, looking back through infinite screens, I remember screaming, but it didn't make a sound. One of the light forms reached forward, touching my face, and everything went white. When I woke up, it was daylight. The cabin door was open, snow halfway across the floor. My camera sat on the windowsill, still recording. I checked the time code. It had been running for 7 hours straight. The last image on the footage wasn't the sky. It was my face close up, whispering something to the lens. I don't remember saying it, but I've played it back 100 times. My eyes don't blink once. Don't believe what they told you. The aurora isn't light, it's memory. The footage went viral before my account was deleted. Now, when people watch it, some swear they can see faces moving inside the sky. Others say they hear their own name whispered faintly in the background. I don't know which scares me more, that they're wrong, or that they're right. You probably won't believe this, but I've been mapping ghost towns across Alaska for nearly a decade, and I'd never heard of Clearwater Hollow until we stumbled into it, and we didn't find it more like it found us. Our team was small. 4 of us from the University of Anchorage, funded by a state grant to document lost settlements buried under permafrost. We were supposed to spend 2 weeks exploring abandoned mining camps north of the Kuskokwim River. Simple gig: take photos, log coordinates, cross-reference with pre-1940 census records. Nothing supernatural, nothing glamorous. We left base camp on January 9th. The snow came early that year, thick and dry, falling in quiet sheets that erased the horizon. By the 3rd day, GPS readings started acting up, coordinates looping back on themselves, altimeter spiking and resetting. We blamed solar interference. Happens a lot out there. Then we saw the tracks. They looked fresh boot prints, leading off the trail into a grove of stunted spruce. But there hadn't been anyone near us for miles, not even snowmobile noise. The prints were too deep, too clean. No melting, no drift. Against protocol, we followed them. The forest thinned out, and then suddenly we were standing on a road. Not a trail, not a clearing, a paved road. Asphalt cracked, but visible, snow-blown clear in strange, circular patches. At the far end, a sign half buried in frost. Clearwater Hollow, Est, 1913. None of us had heard of it. No records, no mentions in the archives, no dots on any map. But the town was there, stretching along the valley below us, rows of dark rooftops and telephone poles leaning at odd angles, like they'd been waiting under the snow for someone to notice. We camped on the outskirts that night. The wind didn't sound right, less like wind and more like breathing through pipes. I kept thinking I heard distant voices. My colleague Rena said it was probably the ice shifting in the old houses. At dawn, we walked in. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not rot, not dust. Something sweeter, like sap or burnt sugar. It clung to everything, especially the air near the well in the town square. The buildings were perfectly preserved, windows intact, doors unlocked. A general store, a post office, a diner. We found old ledgers still on the counters, dates frozen in the year 1956. But there were no signs of collapse, no decay. It was as if everyone had just stepped out for a moment. Rena kept filming, her GoPro mounted to her parka. She said the footage kept flickering every time she pointed it toward the church at the far end of Main Street. I checked it myself. Every frame facing the church came out black, like the lens was covered. We split up. 2 of us checked the diner. It looked brand new. Half-eaten meals sat on the tables, plates still warm. No dust, no cobwebs, no animal tracks. Just silence. Then, faintly, we heard music. Piano, slow and off-key, coming from the church. We regrouped outside, arguing whether to go in. Rena insisted we head to it. Was the only place reacting to our equipment. I didn't want to, but she was lead researcher. The church door was unlocked. Inside smelled of pine resin and smoke. Candles lined the altar, flickering, though no one was there to light them. The piano sat near the pulpit, keys moving on their own, and on every pew there was a coat, thick, woolen, folded neatly, all identical. No footprints, no dust, just rows of coats, waiting. When Rena stepped forward, the piano stopped mid. The candles went out all at once. The silence that followed didn't feel like emptiness. It felt aware. Then, a voice from the back of the church whispered soft, almost polite, "You made it back." When we turned toward the voice, there were people standing in the doorway, hundreds of them, perfectly still, their faces covered in frost. We froze where we stood. The people in the doorway didn't move, not even to breathe. Frost clung to their clothes and hair like they'd been standing there for years, but their eyes followed us. Every single one. Rena whispered, "Is this real?" and started raising her camera. But the moment the lens pointed toward them, the GoPro shut off. Total power failure. Then, as one, they all took a step forward. Not jerky, not zombie-like smooth, coordinated. As if someone had whispered move, and they obeyed. I wanted to run, but my legs locked. My breath fogged in the air, but theirs didn't. One of them, a woman near the front, opened her mouth. Frost cracked off her cheeks. Her voice came out flat and quiet, like she was repeating something from memory. "Welcome back to Clearwater Hollow." Rena bolted for the exit. I followed, shouting for the others. The second we hit the street, the sky dimmed, not clouded, dimmed, like the sun itself had blinked. The air temperature plummeted. We didn't make it to camp. The road we'd come in on wasn't there anymore. Just forest. The path vanished completely. When we checked the GPS, it said we were still standing in the same spot, but the coordinates flickered between numbers, like they couldn't decide where we were. Rena was crying now, clutching her camera, even though it was dead. "We need to leave," she kept saying, over and over. We ran through town, looking for a route that led anywhere else. Every road looped back into Main Street. Every alley opened into another part of Clearwater Hollow. It was like the town was folding in on itself, reshuffling every time we turned away. We passed a row of houses. Lights were on in every window. Curtains fluttered, even though there was no wind. Inside, we could see people, families sitting at dinner tables, heads bowed, not moving, not eating, just sitting. One house door stood open. I should have ignored it, but something about the smell, the same burnt sugar scent from before, drew me in. The interior looked brand new, wallpaper clean, furniture polished. On the mantel above the fireplace, a photo frame faced the room. I lifted it, brushing off a thin layer of frost. My blood ran cold. It was our team. Me, Rena, and the others, standing in front of this same house. The photo was old, edges faded, our faces slightly off, like someone had drawn them from memory. I dropped it. The air inside the house grew heavy, like a pressure wave pushing inward. Outside, I could hear footsteps circling the porch, slow, deliberate, crunching over frost. Rena yelled from the street, "We have to go now." When I stepped back outside, every door on the street was open. The frozen people were standing in the doorways, watching us. No one chased, no one spoke. But when we ran past them, I swear I could hear whispers following us, all saying the same word, "Back." We didn't stop running until we hit the forest again. The map showed nothing but blank space, but there was a faint light ahead, warm, flickering, a fire. Two men stood beside it, dressed like miners from another century, coats, lanterns, the works. One looked up and grinned. His lips were cracked, but his voice was clear. "You made it out again. Thought you'd stay this time." Before I could respond, Rena gasped and pointed behind us. The town was gone. Nothing but snow and trees. No rooftops, no roads. But when I turned back toward the men, they were gone to only 2 sets of footprints leading into nowhere. The light faded, and the woods fell silent again when we finally found our camp 2 hours later. Every photo we'd taken was gone except one new image on Rena's camera, a perfect shot of Clearwater Hollow, glowing warmly under the sunset, with us standing in the street, smiling. We left the next morning. Didn't speak, didn't pack properly. We just loaded the snowmobiles and drove south, toward the extraction site. None of us said the town's name out loud. We didn't have to. Was still there, sitting behind our eyes, every time we blinked. Rena was the first to break the silence. "We weren't supposed to find that place," she said through the radio. "It finds you." The others ignored her, pretending to focus on the trail, but every few minutes, our compasses spun again. The horizon blurred into white. The landscape around us began to repeat same tree patterns, same ridges, same drifted shapes. By the second hour, We realized we'd been circling. Rena started to panic, crying through the headset, saying we'd never left Clearwater Hollow, that it was letting us think we had. I told her to shut up, that we were close to camp. I didn't believe myself. When we stopped to refuel, I noticed something strange on her parka. The logo patch on her sleeve wasn't our expedition brand anymore. It said Clearwater Mining CO-1954. I thought maybe I was seeing things, but when she saw my face, she tore the patch off and threw it into the snow. It melted instantly, sinking through solid ice. That's when we heard it again, the faint piano. Same off-key melody as in the church, echoing across the empty landscape. I killed the engine, listening. The sound wasn't behind us this time. It was ahead. Rena whispered, "No. Please. No," and revved her snowmobile. The others followed, engines roaring, but no matter which direction we went, the music got louder. After another mile, the fog cleared on. There it was, Clearwater Hollow. Exactly the same. Buildings pristine, smoke rising from chimneys. Only this time, there were people moving through the streets. Dozens of them, walking in circles, faces blank and pale, leaving no footprints. I shouted for everyone to stop. Only one listened. The others rode straight in, engines cutting out as soon as they crossed into the main road. They didn't look back, just parked, dismounted, and joined the procession of townsfolk, walking slowly, aimlessly. Rena clutched my arm, whispering, "Don't look at them too long." But I did, and I saw something that still wakes me up at night. The people weren't people. They were us. Our faces, our clothes, every detail perfect copies. One of them turned its head, met my gaze, and smiled. The frost on its lips cracked into dust. I ran. Rena followed. The sound of the piano chased us down the road, notes bending into laughter. We didn't stop until the music faded and the trees returned. We finally reached the extraction site the next day. The rescue chopper was waiting. The pilot said we were 3 days late, though our watches hadn't skipped a minute. When he asked where the others were, Rena didn't answer. She just stared out the window as the town disappeared beneath the clouds. Back in Anchorage, the footage from her GoPro was corrupted. Every file labeled hollow_return. The images flickered, static wrapped, but one frame was clear, us, standing in the church doorway. Behind the frozen congregation, only the timestamp read, January 9th, 1956. Rena hasn't spoken since. She sits in her dorm, window covered with black paper, humming the same warped tune we heard from the piano. I can't tell if she remembers me or not. Last night, I got a package with no return address. Inside was a photograph printed on aged paper. It showed Clearwater, hollow sunset bleeding through the trees. The town looked alive again, but in the bottom corner, barely visible, was a shadow of me standing in the middle of the street, holding my camera. Only I don't remember taking it. The photo smelled faintly of pine and burnt sugar. I burned it immediately, but the next morning, there was a copy on my desk and burned, still warm. You probably won't believe this, but the park doesn't close at night. People think Denali shuts down when the visitors leave, but there's always someone on patrol tracking weather, deterring poachers, checking the cabins. For 12 years, that someone was me. I liked the quiet. Nights in Alaska have their own kind of silence, thick and absolute, the kind that makes your heartbeat sound like a drum. Sometimes you'd hear a wolf pack miles away, or the cracking of distant ice. I used to think I could tell every sound the mountain made, until last January. It started with a radio call from base. A hiker named Andrew Cole was overdue, returning from a backcountry solo trek. He'd checked in 3 days earlier, experienced, equipped, the usual overconfident type. His GPS beacon stopped transmitting sometime after sunset the previous night. They sent me up to Sector 9, the ridge near the old fire tower. Temperature, minus 23 degrees Fahrenheit. Visibility, almost zero. I rode the snowmobile as far as I could, then continued on foot. Headlamp cutting through the fog like a blade. Halfway up the ridge, my radio crackled. A voice whispered through static, "You're close." I froze. The frequency was the same as base camp's, but the voice wasn't anyone I knew. Too quiet, too even. I called in, but the signal died completely. Then came the sound footsteps ahead of me, heavy and deliberate, crunching the snow in slow rhythm. "Andrew," I shouted. No response. When I raised my light, I saw a shape standing just past the tree line. A man, tall, wearing a parka. But something about the way he stood was wrong. His arms hung perfectly still, shoulders stiff, head tilted too far to one side. I blinked, and he was gone. I should have turned back, but I kept going. I'd been trained to follow footprints, and his were fresh. They led deeper into the woods, looping strangely, doubling back over themselves. Some ended halfway across clear snow, no continuation in any direction. At around 2 a.m., I found his tent. It was upright, zipped. Inside were his boots, his stove, his radio all neatly arranged. His sleeping bag was open, still warm to the touch, and then the knocking started. It came from the tree's 3 slow knocks, like someone hitting wood with a bare hand. I spun my flashlight around, beam shaking. The sound repeated, closer now. I radioed base camp again, shouting for backup. Static. Then, faintly, "He's already with you." My headlamp flickered. For a split second, I saw movement, something crawling across the snow, pale and thin, moving too fast. Then the light died. I fired a flare. The red glow lit up the clearing. The trees stood motionless, shadows long and unnatural. And there, at the edge of the light, was Andrew Dot, or at least something wearing his face. He was barefoot, eyes wide and glassy, skin gray-blue from the cold. His lips were cracked open like he'd been frozen mid-scream. But when he spoke, his voice was calm, like someone talking in their sleep. I found the trail. He started walking toward me. Every step made a dry, cracking sound, like ice breaking. I raised my flare again and shouted at him to stop. He didn't. His mouth opened wider, wider than it should have, until his jaw looked unhinged. Then, from somewhere inside that soundless mouth, a second voice spoke. "There's room for one more." I stumbled backward, dropped the flare, and ran. I didn't look back until I hit the ridge, lungs burning, from the tree line below. Dozens of small red lights blinked up at me like flares, but none of them moved. They just watched. By dawn, base camp radioed me again, said Andrew Cole had just checked in at the visitor center, alive and well, asking who'd been using his voice on the Ranger frequency. When base camp said Andrew was alive, I thought they were joking. I told them I'd seen him frozen, barefoot, talking like something was moving his mouth. The dispatcher went quiet, then said, "Ranger Hale, he's sitting right here." I didn't respond. I just turned off the radio and stared down the ridge where I'd seen the lights. The woods looked normal, again, empty, quiet, still. But the sound didn't stop. The faint static of the open channel whispered from my belt, like a voice half-formed always just beneath the signal. I headed back toward camp. Every few minutes, the radio would pop and hiss, someone whispering my name in between bursts of static. Once I heard myself answer back. I didn't remember speaking. At base camp, Andrew looked fine, too fine. No frostbite, no hypothermia. His vitals were perfect. He said he'd gotten lost near the tower, camped for the night, then walked back in the morning, but something was wrong with him. He avoided eye contact. When he smiled, it looked rehearsed, and when I offered him coffee, he took it but didn't drink. He just stared at the steam like it was trying to tell him something. Later that night, I checked the patrol logs. The coordinates where I'd found his camp didn't match where he claimed to have been. His tent, his gear, the footprints, They were all a mile east of where he said he'd slept. The others laughed it off. "You've been out too long," they said. "Mountain plays tricks on your head." Maybe they were right, but when I played back my radio recordings from that night, I heard something that chilled me to the bone. Under the usual static, a faint voice, Andrew's whispering, "Don't let me back in." I tried to show the others, but the audio was gone. Just empty hiss. 2 nights later, I was back on patrol. Standard perimeter check near Sector 7. Around 1:30 a.m., the frequency flared to life. "Hail, do you copy?" It was Andrew again. The real Andrew. His voice shaky, scared. "Something's out here. Looks like me." I stopped cold. "Where are you?" "Tower base. I can see your light." My blood turned to ice. I wasn't near the tower. I was 5 miles south. I turned off the radio, but the transmission kept coming through. "It knows where you are." "Don't look." The voice cut off mid-word, replaced by a low hum so deep I felt it in my teeth. Then the woods lit up. Dozens of red pinpoints blinked between the trees, steady and uniform. I thought they were flare reflections, but the pattern was wrong too, even too deliberate. The snow beneath me trembled. I backed away slowly, scanning with my flashlight. The beam hit something tall, standing just beyond the tree line. A silhouette, exactly my height, head cocked at the same angle I'd tilted mine a second before. I moved. It moved step for step. When I stopped breathing, it stopped too. I aimed my light lower, but there were no footprints in the snow. None at all. That was when my radio came alive again, my own voice this time, whispering, "It's just you now." The light in the trees went out. Every single one by morning. The entire sector was covered in new tracks, bare feet, in perfect rows leading toward the tower. I counted 37 distinct sets. All of them ended in the same clearing, circling a patch of frozen ground where the ice looked like melted glass. Andrew was gone. The logs listed him as missing again. No one asked questions. That night, when I turned off the base radio, it stayed unanned. My voice came through one last time, saying, "Sector 9 needs another ranger." After that night, I stopped sleeping. The other rangers said I was jumpy, paranoid, that I needed leave time. But how do you rest when you can hear yourself talking through a dead radio? Every time I tried to power it down, it whispered my name through the static. Not once or twice, constantly. A heartbeat made of noise. I reported everything to command about Andrew, about the figure that moved like me. They ran psychological evaluations. Found nothing but mild stress reaction. They even joked about making me the new ghost story they tell rookies, but I wasn't the only one hearing things. 3 days later, Ranger Collins went missing. His snowmobile was found at the same ridge where I'd seen the lights. His radio still running, channel locked open. We played back the last 30 seconds of the transmission. There was breathing slow, rhythmic hand, then Collins' voice saying, "Copy, Hale." Only I hadn't been on duty. The others laughed it off again, but I recognized the voice that followed, the whisper that filled the channel after. My own. "He's already here." The next day, the snowstorm hit. Denali swallowed the park, whole visibility near zero, air sharp enough to cut skin. The world turned gray and soundless. I stayed in the outpost, tracking the signal patterns on the ranger frequency. Every few minutes, one of the missing units would light up on the map, active for a second, then vanish. The coordinates were always the same. Sector 9. Around midnight, I saw a light outside the cabin window, a single flare burning red through the storm. Then a second, then 37, in perfect formation, glowing through the whiteout like a procession. I grabbed my rifle, my radio, and stepped into the wind. The cold hit like impact. The world beyond the outpost was almost silent, except for that deep, distant hum, the same one I'd heard from Andrew's tent. It wasn't carried by wind. It was the wind, a frequency too low to hear, but you could feel it in your bones. I followed the lights down the ridge. They weren't flares. They were eyes, hundreds of them, each one faintly red, reflecting my headlamp, and between them, silhouettes, dozens of figures standing in the snow, motionless. They weren't strangers. They were rangers. Uniforms frozen stiff, badges dull and iced over. I recognized faces: Collins, Ramirez, even old Captain Brigson. All missing, all dead, all standing perfectly upright, eyes wide open, and at the center of them stood someone holding a radio identical to mine. Me. Same parka, same badge number, same scar above the eyebrow. He raised the radio to his mouth, speaking calmly over the wind. Base camp, Sector 9 reporting. Visibility clear. The words echoed through my own earpiece, exactly synchronized with my breath. I pointed the rifle. He smiled my smile. I shouted, "Who are you?" He lowered the radio and whispered, "The next one." The ground cracked. Ice split open in a perfect circle around the clearing, steam rising from beneath. The red lights brightened, then one by one began to flicker out, sinking into the ground like embers dying. I ran. Snow gave way underfoot, the world tilting as the ridge crumbled. I don't remember falling, just the cold closing around me like a living thing. When I woke, it was dawn. The storm was gone. The world was silent again. The clearing where I'd seen them was smooth, untouched. No footprints, no gear, nothing. I stumbled back to base camp. They said I'd been gone 3 days. Said my radio had been transmitting the entire time, routine check-ins, reports, even jokes. They showed me the logs. Every line signed off by Ranger Hale. I don't remember saying any of it. The commander told me I'd done good work, that they were assigning me a new partner to replace Collins. But when the new ranger arrived, he looked at me like he'd seen a ghost, because he had. I saw it in his eyes when he looked at my ID tag. It didn't read Halle anymore. It read Cole, eh? I don't know if I died out there or if the mountain just keeps replacing us, but I still take the night patrol, still sign in every hour, and every time the radio crackles, I hear my own voice whispering back. You probably won't believe this, but the Whittier ferry never runs after midnight. There's a reason for that, something about tides, weather, visibility. Officially, it's for safety. Unofficially, it's because of what happened on my shift 3 winters ago. I worked the night rotation on the south terminal, maintaining the loading deck and logging departures. Winter in Whittier is dark for most of the day, but that night, it was absolute black sky, sea, mountain, all one color. The kind of darkness that eats the light from your flashlight. We weren't expecting any more runs. The last ferry to Valdez had departed at 8:15, crew accounted for, manifest signed. The dock was quiet, except for the hum of the generator and the clink of chains, shifting with the tide. I was doing paperwork when I heard the horn. A single blast, low, distant. It wasn't supposed to happen. The schedule was clear. No vessels in the water after 10. I went out onto the deck, thinking maybe a fishing trawler had drifted too close. But there it was, a ferry, lights dimmed, moving slow through the fog. Its engines were silent. I radioed control, got nothing but static. Then I called up the manifest list again. Every boat was accounted for. No return routes. When the ferry reached the dock, the gates lowered automatically, chains rattling as the ramp clanked into place. The air smelled wrong, wet, metallic, like blood on iron. I hesitated before boarding, shouting out, "Whittier dock, identify your vessel." No answer. Inside, the lights flickered with each step I took. The air was freezing, even colder than outside. I called again, louder, but my voice just echoed down the corridors. Then I saw Menta, figure walking slowly toward me through the fog of his own breath. A man in a heavy coat, no gloves, dripping seawater. His face looked waxy, pale, like he hadn't slept in days. I asked for his name. His ticket. He blinked at me, confused, like he didn't understand the question. Finally, he said, "They told me to catch the last one." I told him there wasn't a last one. He just smiled faintly. "There always is." He handed me a wet, torn ticket, completely blank. No numbers, no ink, no date. When I asked where he boarded, he said something I couldn't quite hear. It sounded like beneath. I led him to the cabin, told him to sit tight while I checked the manifest again. As I walked back to the deck, the ferry lights dimmed even more, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The dock behind us was gone. We were moving out to sea. The engines weren't running, but the boat was gliding forward, steady, as if pulled by a current. I ran for the control room, but the instruments were dead. Gauges frozen, dials unresponsive. Outside, the fog thickened until the windows were white. I could still see the man sitting in the passenger cabin through the reflection on the glass. He wasn't moving, just sitting upright, hands folded in his lap, staring straight ahead. Then another horn sounded longer, closer, and not from our ship. The sea around us rippled, waves moving in slow, synchronized patterns like breath. I called for the man again, yelling that we needed to turn back. He stood slowly, looked out the window, and said, "I think they found us." The fog outside began to glow faintly, green at first, then pale white. Shapes started forming inside it, vague outlines of people standing on the water, facing the ferry. The man smiled at me again, wider this time. "It's all right. They're just waiting for the others." I backed away, heart pounding. "What others?" He turned toward me, water dripping from his sleeves, eyes almost clear now, and said, "Everyone who took the last ferry." When I finally looked back at the passenger seats, every one of them was filled with people dripping seawater, all holding blank tickets. Every seat on that ferry was full. I don't know how I hadn't noticed before. Rows and rows of passengers, sitting upright, hands in their laps, eyes open, but glassy. No one spoke. No one blinked. Water pooled beneath their boots, dark and rippling with every movement of the boat. I called out, "This vessel's not in service. You need to evacuate." Not a single head turned. The silence pressed against my chest until I could barely breathe. I stepped closer to the first row and realized what I was seeing wasn't possible. Their clothes, coats, hats, shoes were all decades old, wartime styles. One man wore a wool uniform with rusted pins on the collar. The woman beside him clutched a purse that looked older than me. I stumbled back and shouted again, but my voice came out hoarse. The ferry's engine groaned to life on its own, low and mechanical, even though the throttle was still in neutral. Through the fog, I could see nothing but moving light dim shapes, pacing alongside the hull, just under the surface. The water glowed faintly green, like bioluminescent algae. But every so often I saw something darker pass beneath it. The man with the blank ticket stood near the window, watching me. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, finally, I heard it, his voice, faint and distant, like coming through water. "They remember us." I didn't ask who. I just ran to the control room, tried to radio the Coast Guard. Static again, but under the static, there was something else, a recording. Faint and looped, departing Whittier final passage, final passage. It was the same line repeated, warped and muffled. The ferry jerked, hard. I hit the console. Outside, something massive moved under the hull, deep enough that I couldn't see it, but big enough to shift the water like a living earthquake. The passengers began humming. It started soft. One voice at first, then another joining, until the entire cabin vibrated with this strange, low note, part song, part breath. The sound made the lights flicker, syncopated with the rhythm of the waves. I shouted at them to stop, but it was useless. Their mouths moved like they'd done this before. The man turned from the window, finally meeting my eyes. "Don't fight the current," he said. We'll be there soon, I demanded. Where? He blinked slowly, water dripping from his eyelashes. Where you left us. Then, as if on cue, the fog outside began to thin. Through it, faint outlines appeared, structures, wharfs, towers, a shoreline, but not Whittier. This port was older, smaller, built from dark wood that looked soaked through. The air smelled like rot and salt. I grabbed the emergency flare gun and aimed it toward the deck. You need to tell me what's happening right now. He smiled again, and his teeth weren't teeth anymore. They were small, smooth stones, polished like river rock. We came back for the crew. Before I could react, the ferry scraped against something below. The impact threw me to the floor. When I looked up, the passengers were gone. Every seat empty, puddles of seawater steaming where they'd been. The hum was gone too, replaced by a faint dripping sound, like rain falling through the ceiling. But it wasn't rain, it was footprints. Wet, heavy footprints appearing one after another, leading from the seats toward the corridor. I followed them, weapon drawn, until they stopped halfway through the shipwright, outside the cargo bay. The door creaked open by itself. Inside, rows of lifeboats lined the walls. Only one of them had been deployed recently. The others were dry, untouched, dustless. Then, from the far corner of the bay, I heard someone breathing, slow, rasping, shallow. I raised the flare gun and stepped closer. There was a man crouched beside one of the lifeboats, shivering violently. His skin was pale, his eyes wide and blind with salt. He looked up at me and gasped, "You made it too." I froze, because it was me. The double smiled through cracked lips, dripping seawater, and whispered, "We've been trying to bring the rest of you home." I don't know how long I stood staring at him at me. His skin was gray, bloated, hair slicked flat with seawater. His mouth opened and closed like a dying fish, but when he finally spoke, the voice was mindcome, steady, deliberate. "You shouldn't have left." I stumbled back, hitting the bulkhead. "Who are you?" He tilted his head. The motion was too smooth, too familiar. You know, the air smelled of rust and salt, heavy enough to make me gag. I fired the flare gun without thinking. The light filled the bay, red and violent, and, for an instant, I saw shapes behind him. Dozens of them. People pressed against the walls, faces pale, eyes wide open under the water pooling at their feet. Then the flare fizzled out, leaving only the sound of dripping. When my vision adjusted, he was gone. I ran. The corridor lights flickered as I passed, each one dying as soon as I was beneath it. The ferry groaned, like the hull itself was breathing. I reached the upper deck, heart pounding, lungs burning, and that's when I noticed the shoreline again, closer this time. The wooden pier from the fog loomed ahead, warped and blackened, ropes swinging where lanterns should have been. The vessel slowed on its own. Chains rattled. The ramp began to lower. I shouted, "No, don't you." Too late. The deck hit the dock with a deafening clang. The fog rolled across the gap, spilling into the ferry like smoke. Through it, I saw shadows moving, dozens of them, walking in perfect silence toward the ramp. Not running, not rushing, just walking, one step at a time, as if answering a call. Each figure carried something: a lantern, a briefcase, a child's toy, a life vest all rotted and dripping. The first to reach the ferry stopped at the foot of the ramp, lifted his head, and smiled. His face was half gone, torn by the sea, but his eyes were clear. "We made it home," he said behind him. The others repeated it in unison. "We made it home." I raised my hands, shaking. "This isn't your ship. You have to leave." They all smiled wider. One by one, they stepped onto the ferry, their feet leaving no sound, no prints. The fog thickened until I couldn't see the sea anymore, just gray light and silhouettes closing in. I ran for the control room, slammed the door, and locked it. The glass fogged instantly from the humidity. My reflection stared back, face pale, eyes sunken. Then, slowly, another reflection appeared behind me, my double again, soaked and smiling. "It's time," he whispered. "You are the last." I turned, swung the fire axe at him, but hit only air. The reflection stayed. The radio on the console came alive with static. A new voice spoke, a woman's this time, trembling but clear. "Ferry to Whittier, come in. You're not showing on radar. What's your position?" I grabbed the mic like a lifeline. "This is Dock Operator Hale. I don't know what's happening, but this ferry static swallowed my words." Then, faintly, the same woman's voice repeated from the speaker, only this time it was me speaking through her frequency. "Ferry to Whittier, final passage confirmed." I froze. "Who said that?" "You did," my reflection answered. The lights dimmed. The walls of the control room pulsed once, like a heartbeat. I looked out through the glass. The deck was full, now hundreds of passengers, standing shoulder to shoulder, blank tickets clutched in their hands. Every face was watching me. The man the me stood at the helm beside them. He raised his hand, calm, commanding. "Departure time." The horn sounded. Long, low, final. I looked down at my hands. The skin was white, veins blue beneath it. My reflection smiled wider. I wasn't breathing anymore. Outside, the fog receded, and the sea was still. The ferry glided back into the dark, heading nowhere, carrying everyone who ever took the last ride. They found the dock empty the next morning, ramp lowered, chains rusted, logbook open. The last entry read, in my handwriting, "Final departure logged. All passengers accounted for."